Christian, why do we teach that the earth was created in 6 literal days?
Oh yeah, that's easy. We don't. You appear to be confusing Christianity with modern evangelicalism. But that whole biblical inerrantism and literalism thing is not a traditional Christian way of reading the Bible. And to show this, we can just go back to how earlier Christians read this passage from the Bible. Let's go back to St. Augustine. Augustine pointed out that the whole idea of a literal 6-day creation makes no sense, because a literal day is marked by the rising and setting of the sun, but the sun wasn't created for the first several days. Nor was Augustine some kind of old earth creationist that made the days into thousands of years. He said that the world was created instantaneously, but with seminal reasons built into it that had to work themselves out over time. As was common throughout most of Christianity, he took the details of the story to be allegorical, symbolic. The whole fixation on literalism and inerrantism is not traditionally or conservatively Christian. It arose out of the 1700s with the rise of modern science and people trying to read the Bible like it's a science textbook. Unfortunately, this has become a really popular way of reading the Bible over the intervening 300 years. But it's dumb. Jesus is disappointed. People should stop it.
Did you forget that Jesus practiced Judaism and that he upheld the law as he stated in Matthew 15? So, you are going back and you should probably stop like you're telling other people to stop. And because Jesus might think you're stupid. And recognize that if Jesus, the character that you're leaning on, practiced Judaism, that understanding this 6 days of creation in the framework of a Christian should actually be understood in the framework of an ancient Israelite. Do you understand what I'm saying? So this gentleman, this creator is leaning on what the writings of St. Augustine had written, saying, let's go back to the early Christians. But St. Augustine wasn't born until 354 CE. St. Augustine was born at a time frame and would have grown up and come into his adulthood in and around the same time frame that Theodosius II had made Christianity the religion of the Roman Empire. By the time he became a bishop, it was the religion of the Roman Empire, and therefore he would have thought in a Christian mindset under the Roman government. So thinking about it in a 24-hour day as far as the days of creation may not have been what he would have thought about, because he was not leaning on the understanding of the ancient Israelites, because the Jewish people were still being treated unfairly and unkindly in the Roman Empire at that time frame. So what is it that makes Augustine wrong in his statement and this creator wrong in their statement? The first part is the use of the word during the 6 days of creation, which is yom, which means a day, Y-O-M. It means a day. Some have tried to say that it could mean an era or a time frame or a season. But the problem with that translation or that understanding in the 6 days of creation is that in each day of Genesis, it says, and that was the evening and the morning, and that, so day one. The words around yom does not indicate a season or a space of time. The words around yom indicate the morning, the evening. That was day one. Yes, the problem that St. Augustine had, that many other Christians in the 4th, 5th century were dealing with. Now, mind you, I'm saying 4th, 5th century. Jesus is supposed to have been 1st century. So we got 300 to 400 years of time that has went by for people to reorganize and rethink about it in different formats based on their current culture. But the problem that people were having was, well, we were coming into the scientific understanding that you can't have light and darkness without the sun and the moon. Well, you can have darkness without the moon, but you can't have light without the sun. The sun wasn't created to the 4th day. So if the sun wasn't created till the 4th day, what was the light? So of course, now everything was made simultaneously. But that is still, even if you looked at it in terms of seasons or eras, it still creates a separation of this is what happened on this portion of creation. This is what happened during this time frame of creation. This is what happened on that time frame of creation. There's absolutely nothing in the Genesis story that would make you think that a whole world came into being simultaneously. Now, St. Augustine knew this, but he also knew his position. He also knew the position and power of the Christian church when he was a bishop, meaning that whatever the church out of Rome said, whatever the doctrine was by the leadership, that the people would have no way of debating it or questioning it, because the word of the church, the word of the Bible, the doctrine came at the tip of a spear on the edge of a sword held by a Roman military personnel, decreed and accepted by the emperor of Rome. So there was no availability of free thinking unless you wanted to risk your life. If you were willing to risk your life, then you would go off into your own thinking and challenge these things. But if you were a member of the church, if you was a bishop of the church, if you were a cardinal within the church, if you were a Roman citizen, you knew that your challenge could be met with your jailment, or it could be met with your ending of life. So therefore, no challenge was presented. Augustine's thought process gained more and more prominence and became the doctrine that people were believing until, like the gentleman said, in the 1700s, people started going back to a literist understanding of it. And the reason why they did, because by the 1700s, you're starting to see people with more religious freedom, more freedom of thought. And because they had more freedom of thought coming off the end of the Renaissance, this allowed for them to look at the text, with more people being literate by this time frame compared to St. Augustine time, to be able to say, no, it was the morning and the evening, day one. It was the morning and the evening, day two. It was the morning and the evening, day three. He created the sun and the moon, and then there was the morning and the evening, day four. So I guess now the sun and the moon is taking over their jobs. This doesn't make sense for the first 3 days. Oh, how can it be? It doesn't work. And everywhere else in the Bible, where it uses the term yom, it's either referring to a 24-hour day or just the hours of daylight, which is in around 12 to 14 hours. It's still within the concept of one day, one spin of the earth, and that's it. So you may say, go back to the earliest Christians. But here's the thing. Early Christians didn't write it. Early Christians didn't have the understanding of it. So therefore, it should not be interpreted through the lens of early Christians, who were 300-400 years after the so-called Jesus, and were literally thousands of years after the events are claimed to have happened. It should be understood through the ideas and the lens and the eyes of the early Israelites who actually wrote it. So I think Jesus is looking at you thinking, so sad, so stupid. If he could look. Literary characters don't necessarily have eyes. So you have a great day, and always remember, you have to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.